If Priti Patel was in any other job, would she still have that job? I want to look at her performance as Home Secretary so far in the round. Now, a story broke earlier today about the shocking extent to which Albanian criminals, many of them gangsters, are making an absolute mockery of our deportation system. Last year, Home Secretary Priti Patel signed a new deal with the Albanian government, pledging to take back criminals with no right to be in the UK. Astonishingly, 1 in 7 foreign-born offenders in the UK prisons are actually Albanian, and they really are taking the mick now. Convicted burglar Alex Vishaj was deported, but is now back in Britain again, naturally. He's thought to have used a fake passport to slip back by plane or ferry in September after entering an EU country using a visa waiver, which people in Albania, a non-EU country, can obtain to visit the European Union. And he's by no means the only one. Dorian Puka is back in Blighty yet again, despite 2 convictions in London for burglary and after twice being repatriated by the Home Office. 5 years ago, he was jailed for 9 months for attempting to break into a London home in Twickenham. His DNA was also linked to another burglary as well. He was deported, but was back 12 months later, living just a few miles from the scene of his burglaries. Classic. He was stopped by a police officer, get this, who saw him wearing an expensive watch that he'd stolen earlier that day. He was deported again and, yeah, you guessed it, he's back in Britain. How do we know this? Well, because he apparently has been pictured standing next to a white Porsche in Richmond in southwest London. But it's not just Priti Patel's inability to get to grips with the Albanian problem, which, again, accounts for 1 in 7 foreign criminals in the UK. 28,000 people and the rest have already come across the channel this year. Or last year, sorry, the end of last year, I should say. As far as I can tell, there hasn't been a single deportation. In fact, it emerged that she had a head of Border Force who didn't particularly seem to like borders, and the Border Force officers were reportedly refusing to tow migrant boats back. And, of course, the number of deportations is down in general. In the year of March 2020 to March 21, there were just 2,420 enforced returns, which is down from a peak of more than 21,000 in 2004, although one can maybe assume that COVID did have something to do with that, but that is still a monumental drop, isn't it? London knife crime is now at record levels. 30 teenagers were killed in the capital last year, and the Police Federation of England and Wales passed a motion of no confidence in Priti Patel. And on top of that, under her watch, our terror threat is, of course, severe. In fact, the government is so worried about the chance for terror attacks that they're introducing a law, Martin's Law, that will force some venues to provide protection against terror attacks. I thought that was the police's job, wasn't it? Anyway, she was unable, seemingly, to identify and close a loophole that meant that people could game our asylum system by essentially converting to Christianity so they could say they'd face religious persecution back home. And even years after being refused asylum, people are still out, wandering the streets, presumably in many cases, becoming more and more disillusioned and angry, and therefore more likely to do us harm. Patel was unable to get to grips with Insulate Britain for an astonishingly long time, wasn't she? And don't get me started on Extinction Rebellion. It is a catalogue of shortcomings and failures, isn't it? So I'll ask again, ladies and gentlemen, if Priti Patel was in another job, do you think she'd still have that job?